I was drawn to Colorado because there are big things to think about here. The wide open spaces, the vastness of time, geological, cosmic, the incredible stars that are visible here that have disappeared on the East Coast. All of these ideas are really important to the project that I'm trying to work on. My last project, Redwood Saw, has a lot of parallels to this project. They're both portraits of small towns and the landscapes that surround them. They're both economically depressed towns. They're both towns that have prison work as their primary employer, and they're both towns that are surrounded by a really unique and spectacularly beautiful landscape. I had been doing urban landscape photography in New York City for many years. All my work had been socially critical work, meaning it was work that was about everything that drove me nuts about America. And I thought, what might it be like to try and make celebratory work, to go to a place that you love? So I went to the northernmost reaches of California to a place called Jedediah Smith State Park. It was a glorious experience. I was in exactly the right place at the right time. It was the most visually stimulating environment I had ever been in. And it afforded me the opportunity to bring my compositions to a level of formal complexity that was part of the initial reason I wanted to photograph there. I wanted to fill my frames with as much density, as much space, as much intricacy and shadow as I could. And the compulsion made sense to me because those qualities seemed to be a metaphor for the forest itself. Having photographed the forest, I decided that I was going to go back and shoot the town. My old critical instincts began emerging. I think it's important for artists to consolidate their ideas and impressions about the world around them. And it's important to be able and willing to have an argument with society. So I realized that what I came out to do here wasn't what I was going to do. The better story was the town and the forest. So on the second trip, I began shooting the architecture in the town. And it was on this trip that I realized I wanted to come back and extend my project to portraiture. I was picking up on what at first I thought of as this tremendous vulnerability. And I was relating that vulnerability to what I was experiencing in the forest amid the remains of its once magnificent expanse. I was relating it to the way in which economic forces are bearing down upon this kind of environment, and the people themselves caught up in what, for lack of a better term, I can only call an unsustainable cultural and economic reality. The business of photographing a town is a poetic act, because a town, even a small town, is a big thing. And you have to select, edit, pare down, and represent your vision of your experience, to which you bring all your baggage and all your thoughts and feelings too. When I'm photographing people, it's a very intuitive kind of experience. I immediately know when I look at a face whether I want to photograph it, and I don't always know why. I think it's important to trust those unconscious impulses. There's always a reason for them, and eventually through the work, the reasons emerge. I came to think of this process as a kind of unconscious form of casting. One day I photographed this young girl. Actually, I'd set up to photograph a Ford Gran Torino, a paint-free junker in a hardware store parking lot that looked like a shark and had an unbearable bumper sticker on the back that read, "I'd slap you, but shit splatters," when a girl of maybe about 15 came gliding by on a little girl's Stingray bicycle, and she looked damaged. Just as she was coasting by, I asked if she wouldn't mind being in the picture I was taking. Her face, painful with hope, looked up at me from behind big glasses, and she very sweetly said, "Okay." That evening, as I was thinking about that girl and mentally reviewing all the portraits I'd been making, I came to realize that one of the stronger undercurrents in all the work that I'd been doing was decoding unhappiness. And once I became clear about that with myself, the rest followed more easily. Though there's always that problem, too, of whose unhappiness is being photographed here, the subject or the photographer's. How much is projection and how much is witness and testimony? Both are at play, and that's the key to this work. That's what I love about photography. It works as a call and response. The call is the stuff you look on, and the response is the poetry to which it gives rise. And the two are wed in the way you begin, hopefully, to capture how you feel about the world. I hadn't photographed portraits with a large format camera ever. There has to be a formal setup. You have to have an agreement with the subject. There has to be a thoughtful encounter. And it has to be done quickly. Almost all the pictures I did in Crescent City of people were done in less than 5 minutes of people walking down the street. Whenever I take on a new project, what I'm really looking for is a chance to challenge myself. And I don't want to know where I'm going. I like to have the space that allows for digression, exploration, and change. I ask myself, how can I make this experience more challenging, more rewarding, more complicated, more difficult? And I answered nudes. For a long time, I'd been wanting to deal with the nude. I thought they would up the ante with regard to the issue of vulnerability that had initially led me to portraiture. I thought they would make an interesting contrast with the forest. And they also brought in some biblical themes that I wanted to play with in regard to the Old Testament creation story and the loss of innocence. But most important, I wanted to bring the spirit of Eros into the work. There's a portrait of a buxom young girl in front of a bunch of tall weeds that are in flower in a parking lot. When I photograph people, at first I don't give them any direction. I like to wait and see what they will give me. And as long as it doesn't seem like it's burdened with self-consciousness or artificiality, I'll take it. This girl jutted her bust out, and here she was in the spring in front of this colossal acre of weeds that were just flowering in a parking lot. And it said so much to me about the town, and beyond the town about the human condition. Crescent City has a high rate of teenage pregnancy, and she was right at that incredible moment where she was going to take her greatest asset, which was her youth and her body, and fling herself into the future. And that was poignant to me, and it made me think of doing the nudes. No matter how despairing life is, no matter how dark it is, no matter how painful it is, the story just goes on, embedded in the bodies of these people. It was an incredible gift of intimacy that the people who finally agreed to let me photograph them nude gave me. And it's hard to honor that correctly. It's a great challenge to do the contemporary nude and invest it with all the appropriate complexity and layering of signal. There is something essential about what happens when we get down to our skin. It's hard to get that correct in art, in representation. How do you do that right? By whose model? These primal forms of sexual desire, I want that to be part of my work. It has got to be to reflect life in any meaningful way. So I was led to the forest as a way to get away from all the urban critical work I'd been doing for many years. And the forest led me to the portraits, and the portraits led me to the nudes, and finally the nudes led me to the ocean. I look at the world and I see water shaping every inch of it, and I wanted to deal with that. Every night that I was in the town, I had to get to the ocean. There was a lane down which I could drive my car right to the foot of the coast. And the land rose above me, and I was scooped out into this private relationship to the closest thing we have here on this planet, to the infinite besides the sky. I was drawn there by the feeling that lured me into that old-growth forest initially. The need to experience my smallness and the expansiveness of time. To locate that place from which the imagination can throw itself anywhere. And standing on that shore, looking out into the ocean, you understand that part of looking is the transmission of something that cannot be delivered in any other way. That is where I wanted to end the story, where I began it in a way. The West is a sacred space that we've disrupted, but there's still enough left here, enough wild vestiges of nature that allow you to grasp the idea and the experience, and to feel your smallness in this country. And maybe, hopefully, to come to a greater recognition of its inestimable value.